evil. Evil resulting from natural processes such as earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, floods, and diseases. Atheists claim that these natural disasters can't be blamed on free will and sin. Well, where did they get that information? God tells us in Genesis 3 that it is our fault. That's what the fall's all about. The whole world, the whole creation, groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now because of Adam's sin. So these disasters are ultimately our fault. But because of what Christ did on the cross to redeem us from our sin and its consequences, creation will one day be set free from its slavery to corruption. The fall caused the problem, and the problem is admittedly hard to endure in the interim. But in the consummation of the ages, the problem will be fixed. God is not ignoring it all. He is dealing with it. Understandably, we who are in the midst of it all, we should hurry up and get it done. But He has His reasons for what He is doing, the way He is doing, and the timing of it all. All right, atheists in their arguments say if God were to exist, there would be no needless suffering in the world. Where did they get this information? You get the impression they don't read the Bible much. See, they don't know what they're talking about. They have this make-believe God. I don't know, maybe a bunch of backslidden liberal Christians tell them stuff, and you know, that's getting their idea. But they do not speak of the real God that reveals Himself in the Bible. They're way over their heads in saying there'd be no needless suffering in the world. What the atheist is really doing when he says this is making the unspoken but implied claim that if I were God, I would run the world this way, permitting only this much suffering and evil only to these people in these places and at these times. What they're saying is, I would be a better God than God is. Aren't they? But since God is the one who is God, He should be doing it my way. Isn't that what they're saying? This claim commits the either-or fallacy. It says either God exists but can permit no evil, or there can be lots of evil but no God. That's a logical fallacy. There's a third option they didn't mention. Wonder why? The third explanation shows both how God and evil exist without logical inconsistency. This third explanation supplies many interrelated reasons as to why and how God can and does allow suffering and evil, aside from bringing it upon all individuals and all groups as judgment and punishment, consequences for their sin or foolishness. This third explanation applies mostly, but not solely, to Christians. And we who are Christians will recognize some of these reasons as we go through the list. Okay, these are reasons why God can exist and there still be sin and suffering in the world. Number one, there's a common belief and claim that man is inherently good. But if man is inherently good, how can suffering and evil be so prevalent? If we're inherently good, suffering and evil should be the exception, not the rule that it is. So the fact that there is so much suffering and evil, so much that even atheists think it speaks something of the reality, that shows that man cannot be inherently good. This in turn informs us that mankind is so short of being good, all comes short of the glory of God, that we cannot make it on our own, that we need help to know what is good and right, and then after we know what is good and right, how to actually follow the information, how to live according to that knowledge. It shows us, this sin and suffering, shows us that we need God's guidance and help to do right, just to make this life livable. 2, suffering serves as a deterrent. It motivates us to not repeat the sin that brought on the suffering. Just as pain suffered from touching a hot stove deters a normal child from touching it again. 3, suffering and the helplessness that many people experience in it interrupts their otherwise trouble-free, easy, self-sufficient life and enables God to get their attention when they were otherwise ignoring Him, denying Him, and generally not considering and realizing their need for God's help and salvation. Some of you recognize some of that? 4, suffering enables us to come to have a great hope and joy in the midst of suffering that is beyond the comprehension of those who have not experienced it. And we are counseled to rejoice in trial. Not because the affliction itself is a cause for joy, it isn't, but because in it God can find an occasion for producing great good. 5, suffering encourages us to pour out our hearts to God. And when we do, we are ensured that God understands our pain and even suffers with us. It enables us to draw near to God in this life. 6, suffering teaches us patience and trust in God, so that we learn to wait to see His purpose in our suffering.